Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Coach, do you think hitting traps and upper back every workout would be too much on a conjugate program? It's a weak point of mine and I was thinking of doing rear delt flies and shrugs 4 days a week, high pulls 2 days a week, thanks. Well, it comes down to how much total volume are you doing. Keeping in mind some of the really high volume for some of these supplemental lifts are being run by guys on pretty hefty doses of that there. Here's what I'm going to say. Are you exceeding, by doing this frequency, are you doing this frequency because it's too hard to do more than 5 sets in a workout? In which case, I get that. In other words, let's say rowing or whatever. A lot of people, we start getting the row volume too high, performance degrades. They can only handle so much in a session, so we end up rowing every workout, okay, in order for them to get the volume that they need. But this is for if the upper back and mid back are a very serious weak point. And I have lifters like that. But when we start talking about these other muscles, rear delts and shrugs 4 days a week, well, how many total sets are they getting? If you're exceeding 20 sets by doing that, it's just silly. It's just silly. So in other words, you start looking at rear delt flies. Well, if you're doing those 4 days a week and you're doing 3 sets, or something like that, that's 12 sets of rear delt flies, direct work. Are you not rowing? But you're doing high pulls also. Well, if you're doing high pulls 2 days a week at 3 sets, okay, that's hitting rear delts also. That's a lot. That's 18 total sets for your rear delts. Are you not doing any rowing? You see where this could be problematic? So take someone like me who needs the extra rear delt work. What do? What do? I do 12 sets of rows a week, split in 2 days, and then I do 3 sets of rear delt flies. Okay, that's 18 sets for my rear delts. That's a pretty large amount. That's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work. I do more work for the rear delts than I do the front delts. That makes more sense. But we usually add days on something like that because you simply cannot handle the total volume in a single training session, and you need to get to that 18 to 20 set per week of real work, right? So is that what you're doing, or are you doing this so that you can get like 30 sets in? Well, I'm going to tell you honestly, if you're doing that many sets and you're not doing anything to enhance your recovery, you're not really benefiting from it. You're not going to benefit from it. Why don't you focus on high quality sets and then maybe adding just some rear delt flies or even some shrugs, but even then you need to keep up with your total volume. I mean, you're already doing high pulls, and if you're rowing, and if you're doing speed pulls and stuff on conjugate, make sure that you're not doing too much work for your traps, because you're not benefiting beyond a certain point. You're just not benefiting from doing that much. So that's something for you to think about it. We increase frequency when we can't handle the intra-session volume because performance degrades too much, and we still need to bring up that weak point, and it's a major weak point. Okay, you could just train harder and get to that 18 to 20 set per week done in just 2 days, right? It's totally doable. And I'm not saying I don't occasionally have some of my lifters who really have ultra weak upper backs do some band work and stuff 4 days a week for a while on their programming, especially if they're kind of in that novice area and it's a weak link. But I don't do that for prolonged periods of time usually. Something we do for just a few months and then we drop it back out. But I'm usually having them row 4 days a week at that point also. And again, just doing some face pulls or band pull aparts for really high reps afterwards. But as far as real training for that stuff, I probably wouldn't push that the way that you're doing it. Again, because I already know some of your backstory and you're advanced enough, I really wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I would say just add more work on your main upper days. All right, next question. Do you still think the old school progression is effective, which is 3x5 building up to 3x10? For those unfamiliar with this is something I proposed many years ago at this point. I'll go so far as to say that a good chunk of listeners out there weren't not even lifting when I made that video. And the idea was taking something that they used to do old school. We're talking like the 50s and the 60s. It was a common progression method to where guys would start with a weight that they could handle 3 sets of 5 on all their big movements, and they would add reps. They would add reps however possible. Whether it's 6 reps on the first set and then 5 and 5 until they built up to where they could do 3 sets of 10. Okay. Then when they could do 3 sets of 10, they would increase the weight enough so that 3 sets of 5 got challenging again and restart the process over and over and over. So the question becomes, do I still think this is effective? Sure, it's effective, but why would you train only in that manner? Something that I promote here, and I'm gonna bring home all the time. I do not advocate people other than novices not maxing out. I really and truly believe that the conjugate method of maxing should be incorporated in every program, including even a power building program, which is largely what you guys see me doing these days, right? Right? I max out on lift variations at the start of every session, and then I go into all the volume. So that being said, are you asking me, do I think this is ideal? No, because there's no maxing out. If you want to maximize strength and force production, which this is again a strength channel. This is not a bodybuilding channel. I don't care about bodybuilding. And people always mention like hypertrophy as if that's bodybuilding. That's not bodybuilding. You're not discussing dieting. You're not discussing muscle balance, because bodybuilders aren't always trying to get as big as possible. They're not. They're trying to have balance. Certain muscles need to be in proportion to others. You can't pursue maximum size and be proportionate. You got to pick one. So that's not hypertrophy. And then bodybuilding is dieting and losing muscle and posing and all. That's bodybuilding. So if we're talking even for hypertrophy, well, everyone needs hypertrophy. But if you want to be strong and athletic and powerful, you need to be hitting maxes. And that includes your grandmother. As long as you are not so beat up that you can't do them. So are you asking me, could we do that as a method on a more conjugate type program? In theory. I wouldn't say it's a bad way, but here's the problem with it. You're using the same lifts over and over and over and over and over. If you come in and do this with a barbell squat, just a normal barbell squat, you don't rotate bars or maybe boxes or box heights or anything, I think it's going to lead to some overuse. I'm not saying you won't get big doing this. Actually, you can get pretty jacked doing this. If you program your total volumes and exercise selection pretty good, yeah, you can get pretty dang big using this progression method. It will work. It will work, assuming food, sleep, and everything else are on point. But if you're doing it like this, you're basically just running the same exercises. Okay, that's potentially problematic. We run into, again, that whole overuse situation. So I'm not saying it's a bad way to progress, and it certainly built a lot of big, strong guys. It's not terrible. It will work. And plenty of people have done it, even who followed my channel. They messed with that and did it when I suggested it. But what I would suggest is heavy lifts followed by volume work. I mean truly heavy lifts, training maxes. You could run a system like that, but I wouldn't stay stuck on the same exercises all the time. I would rotate movements. Even if they're variations, you could change your squat stance, change your deadlift style, change your grip width on the bench, your grip width on the rows. But you need to be changing it up every few weeks. And even then, you could go back and use those same progressions. You could keep up with where you were on a wider grip bench versus a closed grip bench, right? And remember the exact reps and sets you were doing and keep working on that progress again on that system every time you work it in. You could certainly do that. Or you could just stick with static reps and sets and work off percentages. What I'm saying is that with a lot of the information I've put out in the modern era of my channel, I've made programming easier to understand and to apply. So therefore, you can apply this programming without having to use a system like that to get those results. So it's really a matter of how you look at it. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.